Well, good morning, or afternoon, should I say. This is Jermine Alberty, and I want to welcome all of you who have joined us for the Sabbaths of Hope orientation, a time of healing, which will be held the weekend of May the 19th through the 21st. If you are on the line and you haven't checked in, we most definitely would like to encourage you to do so. And so at this time, I am happy to be able to share with you the Sabbaths of Hope movement, how it began, and what we hope to achieve on the weekend, once again, of Friday, May 19th through the 21st. Our objective is to make sure that on this webinar we provide you some different resources of how you can integrate.
The conference has been unmuted.
How you can integrate this training, some of this content from this orientation today on that weekend, and also to just talk about how you can integrate mental health awareness in sermons or sacred texts or other liturgy elements. Joining me for this orientation is Para-Rabbi Levin, who is a consultant with AccredAssist and also a licensed clinical social worker and the founder and former CEO, president CEO, Behavioral Health Response. So, Leslie, welcome to the orientation. And if you would like to just give a little bit more about yourself, I invite you to do so.
Hi. I don't know that there's much more that I can tell people except for the fact that I'm now living in Bloomington, Indiana, but spent 30 years in Missouri and have really enjoyed my friendship with Jermine, both through mental health first aid and both being clergy. So that's been a real joy for me, and I'm really pleased to be co-presenting with him today.
Well, thank you, Leslie. There are others who are joining us, so thank you so much for joining the webinar. We've just started off with introductions. I am Reverend Jermine Alberty, the lead consultant for Pathways to Promise, and you have just heard from Para-Rabbi Leslie Levin. So let's jump into more content here, and let's talk about why Sabbaths of Hope was put together. And it started in 2004 in Kansas City. Pathways to Promise has had other Sabbaths of Hope, but this particular initiative started in Kansas City in 2004, and it arose out of a project from the Metropolitan Health Council. And there was an alarming report in regards to depression in the Kansas City area. And so the goal for that group was to figure out how they could work in faith communities to increase awareness around depression. And so this initiative, Sabbaths of Hope, once again started in Kansas City. I got permission from the Kansas City initiative to use content and material and share this with other folks around the nation. So once again, we want to thank all those who have started joining us. Once again, we're just beginning the webinar, so you haven't missed much. But once again, I was just sharing with others why Sabbath Hope was started in Kansas City. So before we get started, I'd like for you all to do a poll for me with regards to when persons think of recovery, the idea of recovery from a mental illness in your sacred spaces, which approaches do most folks here promoted in their sacred spaces? Is it that of using spiritual disciplines like prayer or fasting or reading one's word or meditation? Is it maybe support groups like NAMI has support groups that they may offer, or is it Celebrate Recovery? Is it AA? Are folks encouraged to take medications as a way to recovery? Are all those approaches used? I want to kind of get a feel for this because on the Sabbath of Hope weekend, how we encourage folks to seek recovery is so important. So I see that some of you all are responding. I have some responses. If you continue to respond. Great. So I see that some of you are responding, and you have talked about that all those approaches are used. Some of you all have mentioned support groups. I still want to make sure I give time for others to respond. So let's go ahead, and I will show here the results of the poll. So as you can see, 60% of those of you who responded said that all of these approaches are used, and then 40% of you all mentioned that support groups were one that was used. This is helpful to know because on this weekend, my hope is that individuals will promote these different kind of ways where folks can begin to seek recovery from mental illness. So what we learned in Kansas City is that when we looked at the national census in 2000 and compared to the population, that in an estimated 5 counties in Kansas City, there were approximately 17,572 adult men and over 38,000 adult women who suffer from clinical depression yearly in the Kansas City area. And that's what sparked this need to increase mental health literacy in these faith communities. Being the lead consultant for Pathways to Promise, I felt that it was important that we took this movement and that we took it not just from the Kansas City area and the St. Louis area where I'm held, where I live at, but also that we try to get word out that on this weekend of May 19th to the 21st, that we can dedicate time in sacred spaces to talk about mental health literacy. So what you'll see here is in March 2007, after that discussion was held with multiple stakeholders, in Kansas City, they held their first Sabbaths of Hope conference, and they had over 150 faith community leaders participating, and then a cohort of 24 clergy and congregations that committed to observe Sabbaths of Hope in May. This is still going on in the Kansas City area. And so, as I stated, one of the things I want to do as the lead consultant for Pathways to Promise was to promote this movement at a national level. And so what I hope will happen is that persons will, on this weekend, talk about different types of symptoms of depression, congregants or people, how to referral options, but then also to support to individuals in regards to how they get help for depression or other mental health challenges. So my hope is that through our resources that we offer on Pathways website, that folks can gather that information and to do that. So I've been talking about this weekend, May 19th, and what you'll see here is May 19th through Sunday, May 21st, we are hoping that through education, meditation, to preaching, to worship themes, that we will raise awareness of depression and treatment options while lowering depression stigma, and also through different stories or readings from their faith traditions that folks will begin to increase that awareness. One of the things we want to make sure that we do as Pathways is to ensure that we are providing content that is interfaith. And so right now I was able to have a good friend of mine join us, Para-Rabbi Levin, to talk about how this could be implemented from a Jewish perspective, if you would, in the worship experiences. And so I asked Leslie to join us, but I'm also going to share with you some resources that speak from other faith traditions also. So once again, on this weekend, what we are encouraging individuals to do are threefold. One, to wear lime green or a green ribbon in solidarity to raise awareness about mental illness, and then post those pictures on your social media feed and then link Pathways in there. Also, integrate mental health awareness in your sermons, sacred text readings, or other liturgy components, and then even set up a resource table where you can have information about depression or other topics and how individuals can get help. But the ideal of how do you integrate this into a worship experience is really important. And so I'm going to talk about it from a Christian perspective and a more general perspective, and then Leslie will speak of this from a Jewish perspective. So Leslie, I'm going to have you enter in with your content. And if you all would welcome Leslie Levin, that would be so greatly appreciated. Also, know that you can raise your hand. There is a hand feature that you can raise if you have a question, and we'll answer that question. Also, you can chat with us, and if you chat, we'll be happy to read that question also out loud. So, Leslie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Jermaine. How do I bring up my, never mind. Can you all see that or no? How do I bring up my slides, Jermaine? Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Okay? Yes. Can you see it, Jermaine?
Yeah.
I can see it.
Everybody? Okay, good.
Got it.
Okay, good. So, hi and welcome, and thank you, Jermaine, for asking me to participate in this. I wanted to talk about the fact that within Judaism, we tend to look at mental illness as you would any other illness, and we have a very healing approach to it. And it's really interesting that this session that we're having today falls during the week in the Jewish calendar when we are reading from our Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, of the Hebrew Bible. And this section that we're reading this week is all about when Miriam is banished from the group because it becomes ill, and we believe that she had leprosy. That's the common thinking. And what we don't want to have happen to a person who is living with a mental illness is that they become ostracized from the community. That we want to be more inclusive. So it's an interesting paradox that this comes during the reading of this particular section. So first of all, I thought maybe it might be helpful for me to address some of the cultural issues that surround the concept of mental illness within the Jewish community. And of course, like any other community, there's a great deal of stigma. There's a lot of times there's shame on the part of family members that someone is living with a mental illness. And even the person who's living with a mental illness oftentimes will look at themselves as not a capable person because they can't overcome this on their own. And so one of the problems then is that people don't talk about it, and sometimes they don't even receive treatment for it because of the stigma. Also, because the Jewish community as a whole tends to be a more affluent community, then we end up with a lot more denial about mental illness, because oftentimes it means that someone is going to have to go into a hospital, and that it may not be the kind of hospital that the family thinks is a good hospital. Oftentimes, when I was running the crisis center in St. Louis, we would have Jewish parents calling up because they had adult children who were living with a mental illness, and these adult children needed housing. And the parents were upset that the housing for a person who's living with mental illness was not in the neighborhoods that the family lived in currently and that their child grew up in. And so they were oftentimes not willing to let them go and live in those communities, even though that was probably the best thing for them. And the third concept is that of assimilation. And for many, many decades, Jewish people living in what we call the diaspora, meaning those who are now living outside of Israel, felt that they were different than everybody else. We don't get mental illness. We don't have child abuse. We don't have spousal abuse. And what we're finding is that as we assimilate into the communities, we have everything that everybody else has, and sometimes even more frequently. There seems to be some statistical data that says that the Ashkenazi Jews, and those are the Jews who came out of Central Europe, have a higher incidence of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And so we know that that we have really assimilated into the general community. There's a theological foundation for the way that Judaism approaches mental illness, and the first theological concept is that of B'Tselem Elohim, which is Hebrew for created in the image of God. We believe that every person who walks the earth is created in the image of God. And so if you disparage somebody, you're disparaging God. If you ostracize somebody, you're ostracizing God. And it's a very important concept for us that we remember that no matter who you are, you were created in the image of God. And that doesn't just mean Jewish people. It means all people. There's also the concept of refuah shlema, which means a complete and whole healing. When Aaron and Moses realized that their sister, Miriam, was ill, they said, they prayed to God and they said, El na rafana la, meaning, please God, heal her. And from this came this concept of refuah shlema, which is El na rafana, but the word rafana is the root word for refuah, and so it means healing. And when we talk about healing, we always say healing of the body and healing of the spirit. And so we look at persons who are living with a mental illness as persons who need healing of their spirit, and we pray for them, and we pray for a complete and whole healing for them. And oftentimes in congregations around the country, particularly those of the more liberal congregations, they will ask persons in the congregation to give names of people that you're thinking of when we say this prayer, so that we actually say their names out loud sometimes. Sometimes we just say them to ourselves. And by doing that, we bring those people into our congregation. There is also
the conference is now in listen-only mode. The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
I have a lot of competition with this lady who's telling us what mode we're in. So it's not within our Talmud, which is the commentary on the Hebrew Bible. We are told that we are not to put a stumbling block before the blind. That's kind of it's symbolic of the fact that we should not impede people, and we should help them rather than impede them in their healing. And particularly when we're dealing with someone who is ill and has any kind of an illness, we want to be helpful. We don't want to make it more difficult for them. And the last theological foundation for the Jewish beliefs towards mental illness are something called tikkun olam, which means to repair the world. And we believe that when God created the world, God had a vessel, and the vessel held all of the goodness in the world. And what happened was that vessel broke, and it scattered everything. And so now it's our job to put that vessel, bring everything back together and put that vessel back together. And so as part of that, we want to be helpful to families who have someone in their family who's living with a mental illness, and to those who are living with a mental illness. That it's part of our repairing the world. And we have a concept in Judaism called the mitzvah, the good deed. And so it's a good deed to help somebody else, and it's a good deed to treat somebody as your equal, no matter what their status in the world and no matter what's going on with them. So with all of that said, one of the ways that we incorporate the concept of mental illness into our services and into our theology is through healing services. And a healing service generally has these components in it. There's generally an introduction, and during that introduction, sometimes we actually have someone who is living with a mental illness deliver a little, a short little sermon, and or to talk about their own experience with living with mental illness, or family members of someone who is living with a mental illness. Then we generally have prayers, and the prayers are selected to be healing prayers, prayers that bring spiritual comfort to people and ask God to heal and take care of those who are suffering. And again, we also use the Psalms as a good way to. The Psalms often have a very healing aspect to them. And the last is to say our Misha Berach prayer. And this prayer, we say it in Hebrew and we say it in English, and it asks God to heal those who are suffering both in body and in spirit. So in general and in specific, that's how we handle the concept of bringing mental illness awareness into our liturgy and into our services.
Leslie, thank you so much for sharing. I would like to invite anyone who has joined us who may have specific questions to do that right now. Is there anyone?
I only have just one question. It's really very, very stimulating to hear what you've been saying. I noticed that you haven't used the word recovery. We always kind of wonder in our own faith communities, when we talk about a healing service, it's just like, okay, now you're going to be cured. And most of what I understand in terms of mental illness, and especially clinical depression we've been talking about, how help people to be in recovery rather than to be healed. How would you understand that?
I don't know that it is for us, for lay people, in a service to talk about recovery, because recovery is a process that someone goes through. And I think healing is a more general term, and it means maybe you're not going to be in recovery, but maybe you're going to feel a little bit better, or you're going to be able to. It also allows us to talk in terms of family members, and family members who need healing from the pain that they suffer. So I think that's what we're really addressing here, is the pain that people suffer, and that's why we chose healing.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Clay? Well, I want to thank you, Leslie, so much for sharing with us, and to most definitely, talk more about recovery. We know that is an individual journey that people walk on, and that recovery takes many forms. We know that for some it could be remission of symptoms. For others, it may be that they are able to enjoy their lives despite the symptoms, and recovery takes on many components. So, hopefully just the ideal that recovery is possible, even though it may take many forms, could be, a major source of hope for many people. So I want to share with you all some different resources that we have on the Pathways to Promise website that can hopefully assist you on this weekend. So I'm going to share with you my browser, and so you'll be able to see my browser, hopefully. So do everyone see my browser there? If you can just say yes, you see it, that'd be great.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
All right, great. So what you'll see here is that I have the event here, Sabbaths of Hope, and once you click that link, it's going to take you into basically the event itself. Has a wonderful little clock counting down to how soon it is, 13 days. And what you'll see here are various different resources that I have put out for you to use for this particular weekend. So this document here is Compassion Sabbaths of Hope Kit. This is part of the Sabbaths of Hope initiative that was started in Kansas City, and they've put together a lot of different resources here that can help in faith or different spiritual traditions to integrate within their services. So you can download this PDF document. I'm going to be continuing to upload resources as the week continues for you all to have access to. But what I found really interesting was some information here, and it may take a moment to scroll down just because everybody's connection may be a little bit different here. Let's see what it comes up with here. Well, let's see. Ellen and I was talking in the group about how technology is wonderful when you can figure it out, and that's where we are right now. So it seems as if, let me just go ahead and back out of this real quick, and let me try to open it again and see if it will open up. My hope was I can show you some of the different resources here, and that way you could be able to know where they were. While that's loading, you'll also see here this mental health guide, which has a plethora of material that help faith communities understand mental health and intervention and referral strategies. This next document is a one-pager, and this was produced by the American Psychiatric Association Foundation. It's a wonderful resource, and this is a quick reference guide here that points folks to those resources. Maybe I can see if that will come up much quicker. You'll see a bulletin insert here that you can also download and be able to put into your insert. So here's that quick reference on mental health for faith leaders. Some of you all may have seen this before. It's an awesome resource that talks about observable signs and how to communicate with someone who may be affected by a mental health condition. You'll also see on this back page here, if you're concerned that somebody may be suicidal, what are some warning signs if someone is suicidal, and what are some risk factors? And then what's really important is how do you make that referral? Who do you connect that person to? What kind of tips should you keep in mind? What if somebody's resistant to getting help? What should you do? So this is a great resource, and once again, as I mentioned, put together by the American Psychiatric Association Foundation. This right here is just a really brief synopsis of the overall larger document that is here. This here is what is called a stigma pledge card, and my hope would be that we could have individuals complete these cards at the service or at that event that may be held on this weekend, and make a pledge to do something to reduce stigma, to promote recovery. So it seems as if a lot of my attachments here are taking a little bit more longer to upload. So I'll go ahead while that's happening, talk about a few other things that you may see in front of you, and that is the bookmarks. These are different bookmarks with prayers on them that individuals can pray in regards to, once again, a prayer to God of all hope, or a prayer, hope to find myself, or a prayer when I feel depressed. These different resources can also be used during service. And then I have a awareness toolkit that is chock full of information about how you can continue to promote mental health awareness after this Sunday. one of the things that you may hear in the field is person first language. And how do you talk about mental illness? Instead of saying somebody is schizophrenic or somebody is bipolar, we encourage folks to say a person with bipolar, a person with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. So here's a handout to give some information about person first language. And then lastly, there's a brochure about Pathways to Promise that points folks to our website and things, other things that we offer here. So it seems like a lot of these things are taking a little bit longer to download, and I think that's because of the connection I'm having here in my office. But I just wanted you to see here that we have just a host of resources here that persons can access. So are there any questions that anyone may have of me with regards to some of these resources or things of that nature? So I mentioned the pledge card here, and this is what the pledge card simply says, that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Take a ribbon, and I do have some ribbons available. I purchased about 500 ribbons, and so if there are individuals who would like some ribbons, I would encourage you to email me and let me know. I only have 500, but I'm happy to try to get some of those mailed out to individuals. You would print this card off, and then basically folks would take a ribbon, make a pledge, and the pledge is to raise mental health awareness and reduce stigma. I will, and they'll make that pledge. And then the goal could be to encourage folks from May throughout the rest of the year. How are you keeping your pledge to raise mental health awareness? So this is hopefully one of the key takeaways from this weekend, is that folks will, one, have greater awareness of mental health, make a commitment to reduce stigma through how they use language, serve as a resource to be able to refer folks to proper treatment, so forth, by having a resource table. These are some of the aims that we hope to accomplish with this weekend. So hopefully silence is more of people thinking and not people gone. Are there any questions for Leslie or myself? Well, if not, let me do my next poll here. And if you would participate in this, to at least let me know how many of you plan to participate in the Sabbaths of Hope weekend. That would be great for us to know. If you do plan on participating, just send us an email, and we'll be happy to, one, send you some more resources, as well as send you more information that you may need to make this a successful weekend.
I think one of the things is this great ideas and content here, Jermaine. It's just I know, like in the UCC, we have May 21st as Mental Health Sunday, and many congregations already have and put together programs. So this is kind of we're pretty close to when we're going to be working on this. For instance, I'm going to be at a church in Berkeley, California, on May 21st. And doing an educational program and preaching and that kind of stuff. So it's a good idea, and I like the idea of ribbons. I happen to wear the silver ribbon from the NAMI thing, which is a silver ribbon for the Brain campaign, which is also the same deal. Bring awareness for mental health and reduce stigma. It's just I'm just responding that it's kind of a little late for us to look on the May 21st thing for the UCC. So
well, absolutely, and I hope. Thank you, Alan. Our hope is that for those congregations that may not have planned anything, that they can just use.
Sure, I agree. It's very good. It's a good resource
to do that. And so hopefully, we can spread the word to people who are just looking for a jump start of what can I do, what may, what resources can I pull down for that event. So, and we are always hoping to be able just to be a support to folks who need some assistance. Rita, you have your hand up. What can we do?
Well, I was in NAMI. We recognize Mental Illness Awareness Week in October.
Yes.
And it's always frustrated me that for many congregations, the first Sunday in October is also Worldwide Communion Sunday. And, it's kind of difficult to have too many things happening on the same Sunday. And the other concern I have has to do with the language. The difference between mental health and mental illness, there's often a confusion of definition. And I'm sort of from a historical viewpoint, and correct me if I'm wrong, the mental health awareness information, I believe, sort of started with what was originally, I forget what the original name was, but it's Mental Health America now. And then mental illness awareness came through organizations like NAMI. And I think for the lay person, they may be confused by the different terms.
One of the things in mental health first aid that we talk about is that, a mental health challenge or a mental health problem, that language is inclusive of both mental illness, mental disorder, or persons who may not meet the criteria of a mental illness or disorder. And so often when I talk about mental health challenges or mental health problems or mental illness or disorders, those terms are often, at least in mental health first aid, used interchangeably. We want to make sure people really understand that people who have disorders like depression and bipolar, that they are real illnesses. And so I also reinforce that language also. There is still the struggle in some faith communities about the term mental illness. Some people are afraid to use that term. And so it's still education to say to not use that term can be stigmatic. So I work with faith communities on a regular basis about the importance of understanding that the acceptance that this person with depression or with bipolar or schizophrenia has an illness is important. First part of that acceptance is important there for faith communities. So I think that there may be some confusion for some in regards to what is mental health or what is mental illness for some, but I do my best to educate people about both of those. I would say that, I do a lot of work in October to recognize NAMI Mental Illness Week, so forth, and I think there's still a way where there's other faith communities that may not have that celebration that they are on the liturgical calendar, but we can still reach out to those other Protestant groups that may not recognize that first Sunday as that. There are some faith communities that are not on that liturgical calendar. So I think there's still some efforts that we can make on that weekend to reach out to faith communities. Did that somewhat answer your question or your concern, Rita?
Yeah, I think we just all have to remember that, especially when we're reaching out to people in the community, that they have either don't have definitions or have different definitions, and sometimes just having a discussion about what their understanding is can help facilitate the discussion.
I agree 100%. I think that one of the other terms that we've been talking about is the term behavioral health. For some folks, behavioral health seems to be more a term that's accepted than mental illness, and so we've often dealt with that, behavioral health, mental illness, all those terms, just really ensuring clarity in what those mean are really important. There are others who are on our call who we haven't heard from, and I would invite you, if you have a question or a comment that you'd like to make, to feel free to do so. or you may just come on board to listen, and that's okay also. Leslie, you're still with us. Do you have any closing remarks that you would like to make to the group?
No, I think that it's been a good discussion that I've listened to here, particularly around language. And if we do nothing else, as we go forth in our efforts to destigmatize mental illness, our language will be one of the big ways of doing that. So I appreciated that conversation, and I plan to have talk with my rabbi about having a Sabbath of Hope the weekend of May 19th through the 21st, and hopefully we can do that, and I hope others can too.
Yeah, we know that October is another opportunity for us to get awareness out. But I think that even if we don't wait for a particular month, any time is a good time to increase mental health awareness. Any time is a good time to increase awareness of how we as faith communities or spiritual communities should be reaching out to those who may be wrestling with or struggling with the symptoms of mental illness. I'm one who do not like to belabor things if everything has been said and done. So if there are no other comments or no other questions, I want to thank you once again for joining this webinar and encourage you to go to our website, pathwaystopromise.org, to get more content. If you had a question that you didn't feel comfortable asking me online, please feel free to email me at jalberty@pathwaystopromise.org. And we will continue to try to host other educational opportunities such as this in the near future. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too. Shalom.
Shalom.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.